Only because we have 2 games to examine both these teams. I think that because of the ability, what Dak, 2 things just very obvious as far as evaluating. How they've protected Dak, the lack of protection on Carson Wentz, all that being one subject, and Dak's ability, how much better can he get or can he maintain this? Like his ability to throw the ball down the field. I'm very impressed with how the coaching staff and Dak have gone to this 4th year that he's going to become a passer. Now, we know he's a good athlete, so if you bring in the dual read threat later on, like what are defenses going to do? We knew they had a problem last year as far as the red zone. Seems like right now, small sample size, they've solved some of those problems. But Kellen Moore, in 8 quarters of football, you have to be impressed with him coming out of the league a couple years ago, the relationship him and John Kitna have forged with Dak Prescott to be able to help him go to that next level. To me, that's a decisive advantage over Philadelphia. Carson Wentz, I believe, is a better quarterback, but he's running for his life. We know what Zeke's going to do. We're going to give him 3 or 4 games to get back to 100%. But last week, you could put last week's tape in. When he gets into the Hall of Fame, you put his tape in the clips of all the other tape, you would be like, oh, that was his 2nd game back. No, it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. So I think that what they're doing with Dak, as impressive as he's been through the air, it gives them a decisive advantage right now in the passing game, even though Philly, they got more weapons, I believe, proven weapons than Dallas. But Dak and how he has adapted to, I am a pocket quarterback when I want to be. And if you take away my running game, I feel like I can beat the best teams with Dak's arm in the receiving core, Nick.
Going into the season, I gave Philadelphia the decisive advantage over Dallas because I thought they had a decisive advantage at coach and at quarterback, coaching staff, if you will, and quarterback. Through 2 weeks, they do not look to have a decisive advantage in the coaching staff because of the things Kellen Moore and John Kitna have done to open up this offense. And through 2 weeks, they do not have an advantage at all at quarterback. Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate. Carson Wentz has played mediocre. He hasn't played poorly, but he hasn't played great. But because it's only been 2 weeks and because the evaluation going into the season was based on the previous 2 years, not just 2 games, I still give Philadelphia an edge in those 2 spots, but barely. So who do I think's the better team? Philadelphia. Who do I think's going to win the division? Philadelphia. But right now it's a 55-45 proposition as opposed to before the year when I thought it was closer to 80-20. And the point that Chris makes about Dak continuing to evolve as a passer and Dak being able to not only make his first read but his second or third and deliver the ball on time deep downfield has been one of the most, just behind Lamar Jackson, for the most impressive development for any player this season as far as progression towards wherever they're trying to get to, whatever their football apex is. There is an element, though, when we're looking at these 2 teams that I have to stop and I ask myself, all right, so they both played Washington, they both beat Washington. The difference in record is Dallas beat the Giants, Philadelphia lost in Atlanta. If those games were flipped, if Philadelphia had gotten a game against the Giants and Dallas had to go to Atlanta, would it still be 2-0 and 1-1, but the teams reversed? Right. I think it might be. And so that's another reason why I don't want to overreact to what we've seen, because the 1-game difference at Atlanta versus playing the Giants is a substantial one in my mind.
Well, I think the overall injuries. You got one team's canceling practice. Yeah. Dallas is getting more players back. You know, so I think that's a major difference. Even regardless of who the opposition is, when you got injuries and you can't practice, that's significant.
Well, both of you made your decisions, for the most part, based on quarterback play, where Dak Prescott is, where Carson Wentz is. At what point do we start getting worried about Carson Wentz, that maybe this is not just shoddy offensive line play that hasn't really protected him, or maybe it's not just him putting himself out there, but maybe this is a trend for this Eagles team this year? You worried about him?
I'm not worried because I would be overreacting to the Atlanta game. The reason why Carson Wentz wasn't great in the Atlanta game, he wasn't bad. I mean, he was bringing the team back, but the offensive line didn't give him the type of protection. So I'm worried about Carson Wentz getting hit. I'm not worried about Carson Wentz. Is he an elite quarterback? No, he can still make every throw. I'm concerned about some of his weapons being nicked. So the overall injury, that offensive line coming into the season, ranked #1 by Pro Football Focus. I haven't seen a dominant offensive line in 8 quarters. Will they be able to run the ball? Or are they going to be one-dimensional? So, no, I'm not worried about Carson Wentz. I'm more worried about the protection and that offensive line.
Listen, Wentz was running for his life in Week 2 against Atlanta, and Atlanta's not a team known to have a dominant pass rush. Now, they've spent some draft picks to try to add to that pass rush, but aside from 1 year from Vic Beasley, whether it's Tack McKinley or Vic Beasley, outside of that 1 year, those picks have not necessarily paid off the way they had hoped. Philadelphia has to fix that because Carson Wentz, the best plays he was making, he was avoiding contact or while going to the ground making a pass. And so that is a major concern because he did get nicked in that game. He did have to leave that game briefly and then come back. And that's something you don't want for any quarterback, much less a quarterback coming off 2 straight season-ending injuries. But I also like to step back and say, what if? What would the narrative be if Nelson Agholor had just held on to what would have been the game-winning bomb thrown by Carson Wentz down the sideline after the Julio Jones play? Carson put that ball on the money, hit Nelson Agholor in his hands, and he just dropped it. The numbers would look different, and the narrative would be very different in that circumstance. Now, to Chris' point about injuries, Deshaun Jackson maybe makes that catch. That was thrown to Agholor instead of Deshaun because Deshaun is out of the football game and out the next couple weeks with a groin injury.
Yeah, so my commentary wouldn't change much because I'm just worried about the protection.
Sure.
If he catches that ball down the sideline, I still give Dallas an advantage because what they have shown us. Dallas, their offensive line, there have been question marks on it the last couple years. But Travis Frederick coming back, that offensive line has looked great compared to what's going on. So even if Agholor catches that ball, to me, I'm still going to give Dallas an edge because of the inability to consistently protect their quarterback.
Not just Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey is also nicked up, so they do have a lot of problems there on that receiving core for the Eagles. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.